loves, my name is Khanya Modipa. I am a chartered accountant and I'm sharing with you guys how I built my investment portfolio. I think it's important to emphasize though that I am not a financial advisor, so I cannot give you specific advice with relating to your specific financial needs, but I can share my story. Just before we get into that, however, it is important to also emphasize that please subscribe if you haven't, please like, please comment, to do all those amazing things. Share with your friends. I think as young people, sometimes we don't really talk about money as we should be, so let's get into that whole financial responsible thing. Share with your friends, and if you are not yet following me on Instagram, please do so. I have a page there called Save with K Finance, where I give my little tidbits on how you can be better at saving your money. So let's dive into the story of my investment portfolio, my loves. So with me, I just also want to share that I come from a middle class family. So we don't come from a lot of money, but we also are not necessarily extremely poor. We're just in the middle. And we have been taught as children in the household that we need to be responsible with money. I went to Wits University and I studied BCom accounting. The first 4 years of my studies, I was making... Actually, this was not, it wasn't like part of the plan to make money. I just ended up having money, but I blew it all. So I have a video on that where I blew 250,000 Rand basically. I was a recipient of a bursary and the residence money, I was paid that directly into my bank account because I decided to stay at home, or rather my parents decided that I needed to stay at home. And instead of me, setting up some sort of savings account or something, I just blew the money. But I was young and I was naive and I don't know what I was thinking, but I basically blew the money. But as I became more financially savvy, as you start learning about these things, especially as a commerce student, I realized that it was very important for me to start have like an investment portfolio, like just do something with the money, right? So when I started to work, I was in my articles, so I was working at KPMG. The first thing that I did when I got my salary was like, look, I need to sit down with someone who knows money, like somebody, them people who really like it's their job to do all of these investment things. I decided, no, I'm going to do that. So I contacted Liberty. Again, I'm not advising you guys to go to specific companies. It is up to you where you want to go. This is just me sharing my story. I went to Liberty and I was like, look, this is the money that I want to invest with my salary. So I was also, again, lucky enough that I wasn't paying for a car. My parents were paying for my car and I was staying at home. Again, I need to keep adding this context because I don't want y'all to put yourself under pressure. Bearing in mind also that article clerks do not make much money. I think I was making about 10,000 Rand a month. And this is bringing me to tip number 1. Do your research. Really don't go with the first company that you see. Don't go with the first company that gets mentioned. Do your research. Why? Because I didn't know this thing called fees. Oh my gosh, they can get so expensive over time. You are paying about sometimes like 2% even if you're not really researching into these things, and they add up. Oh my gosh, they add up. And sometimes it's like, but bro, we're not doing well, like what's happening? But yet you're still getting your fees. Like how's that working? So it's important that you understand fees. Okay, so anyway, put my money every month as a debit order, because that, I must say, was the best advice I ever got, was to get a debit order so I don't have to think about this. So I put my money into Liberty at the time and they were making decisions on my behalf. And what do I mean by that? There was a unit trust that was put in. So there is a person, an asset manager, I'm sure you've heard the term, an asset manager somewhere, who's taking everybody's little funds, and they make these decisions on your behalf on where they're going to be putting this money, right? And they also had specific percentages that they were investing in. So for instance, like maybe 20% into NASPAs and like, I don't know, 2% in ShopRite and 3% in Sassel, etc. So some guy somewhere is making all of these decisions on your behalf. If you're not a person who even understands like the stock market at all, this might be an option for you, right? And like I said, for me in the beginning, I didn't understand the stock market. They would mention it on 702 and I had no idea what that was, right? I felt more confident in letting somebody else make that decision for me. However, when I moved to the United States of America, I really just started becoming a little bit more confident and having conversations with people with regards to money. I realized, no, I actually should start taking more responsibility. And there was all of this talking about like this brokerage platforms that, you know, these tech ones like Robinhood or Easy Equities, right? And I was like, okay, so does this mean like I get to make the decision on what shares I want to buy? And they were like, you can do that. So I was like, okay, let me start small, right? So with money that I know I'm kind of okay losing, like if I make a mess up, like this is money I'm okay with. Also bear in mind, and if you haven't watched this, please check out my first video where I talk about saving, investments, and all of that, like investing as a beginner, because it's important that you save first before you start investing. Okay, the wonderful thing about some of these investment platforms that we can get on our phones is that they also offer like demo accounts, so you don't actually have to start with your actual money. You can start with fake money and see how you're performing over a period of time, and then when you're feeling more confident about, you know, doing that, then you can start using your actual money. So I just went straight in with my actual money because I was like, I'm young, I'm free, I'm gonna do this. So I put my money into Robinhood, very small in the beginning, and I started doing stock picking. And at the time I didn't realize it was stock picking, but basically it was just me purchasing shares from companies like Apple, Facebook, Amazon, Tesla, etc. These were companies that I had heard of. Again, emphasis on I was investing in companies that I understood. Like I knew what they were up to, right? Like I know what Amazon does. I know what Apple is. Like I use their product, you know, I know what Tesla is. I cannot emphasize the importance of investing in things you understand, right? You don't have to use that particular product or service, but you need to at least understand it so that when hits the fan, you are at least like, no, this is normal. This is what I expect for this particular company, you know? So I'm not going to divest now in that company because this is happening. This makes sense to me. The other thing that I had was a lot of like risk appetite. Like my risk appetite is pretty high. Like I'm willing to go high risk, high reward. And I think it's also because of the fact that I still view myself as extremely, well, I am young. I'm in my 20s. So I'm young. And so I just feel like, you know, this is the time for me to go into the higher risk sort of stocks, because, you know, there's a higher reward to those stocks. And, you know, tech stocks can be quite high risk. And then also I do have blue chip companies such as Sasol or Apple. Those are the kind of shares where I feel like, you know what, even when things are bad, like these are the companies that I know will still be able to stand the test of time, you know? So you have those shares where you're like, you know, I am not sure about Tesla. I'm not sure how he or she's going to behave. However, I do know that with Apple, like people like smartphones, people like MacBooks, etc. This is a company that tends to do okay. In the end of the day, they're going to do okay. So that's how I decide on what shares to buy, and I try to keep things balanced. So I'm sure you guys have heard of the term diversification. It is a wonderful little thing that you need to start incorporating when you're going into investments, because like I said, each and every one of these things have different risks. They have different rewards. You don't want to go too high risk, because in the event that things blow up like the 2008 recession, you don't want to be sitting with a situation where you have absolutely no money, you're seeing losses, etc. You'd rather have this sort of like leveling out situation. Mine tend to be skewed more to higher risk because, again, I'm looking at how old I am, but it's still very much balanced. Another beautiful tool that I then started to learn about are index funds or ETFs. So they're not as exciting as, for instance, like normal stocks. Well, I don't find them as exciting as normal stocks, because their growth is like, you know, it's when you're seeing it over a 3-month period, it's not like, you know, like Tesla, it's just like, with ETFs, they like steadily grow, right? Which is actually what you want. Like you actually want that, because ETFs tend to outperform just like stock picking, you know, because again, you're not really an expert at this stuff. And again, an index fund or ETFs, exchange traded funds, are basically you deciding that you are going to put your money into a myriad of companies from a specific industry, like the top 500 companies, like the S&P 500 is like the top 500 companies. I have one where it's like millennials, like companies that millennials tend to use. Like I have an ETF in that. So yeah, you can use different types. You can have like different types of ETFs. One thing I've also started learning with ETFs and stock picking is be careful that you're not overlapping your stocks. So it doesn't make sense for you to, for instance, invest in like the S&P 500 and then you are also investing in Apple, because Apple's already in there, but basically you're compounding your risk or you're compounding your reward. So maybe if Apple doesn't do so great, like your stock is going to go down, but you know, like you're basically like, when you're overlapping that, you're not really diversifying. Diversifying, the whole principle around that is that you are trying to spread your risk and you're trying to spread your reward. So if you are ending up picking the same stocks that you're investing in the index fund, it just defeats the whole purpose of that. So just be aware of that, and you can look through what companies are in an index fund by looking at the fact sheets. It's really just that simple. Also, the beautiful thing about ETFs is that they generally do not have very high fees. So like, for instance, for me, when I was looking at Liberty and I was looking at Momentum and I was looking at all of these other companies, they had very high fees. But with ETFs, they generally have very, 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 very low fees. So it's another way to own the stock market without having to pay a lot of money, and they tend to do really well. So in my opinion, I think that ETFs are a good way to start growing your investment portfolio. And then obviously there are other ways to grow your investment portfolio, like looking into real estate. Again, I'm not an expert at real estate, so that's not something that I've ventured into yet. However, this coming year, I have been looking at certain properties, especially in South Africa. Because of the pandemic, it's become more of like a buyer's market. People are really running short of money, and so they're willing to sell their homes or their apartments or whatever at a very relatively lower amount. So this is working to your in your benefit if you're somebody who's trying to buy. So there are certain properties that I am looking at. They're actually brand new properties, so there won't be like transfer fees, etc. But another thing that you need to consider is liquidity. So in your investment portfolio, liquidity is important to consider. What do I mean by that? How quickly can you make this thing into cash? Because cash is king, right? So how quickly can I convert this little apartment building that I have purchased into cash? Not so quickly as maybe selling your shares, which you can do relatively quick. I think for me with Robinhood, if I decide to sell my Amazon shares today, I would be able to get the money in like 2 to 3 days into my bank account. So it's relatively easy. But again, I like, for instance, with me, with my investment portfolios, especially when it comes to stocks, I have a very long-term view. I have a 5 to 10 year plan. I'm not trying to sell my stock at any time. Because the life that I'm leading now, I'm able to sort of pay for my expenses. I have savings in the event of an emergency, so I can pull from that. So there's no need for me to be bothering with my investments, and I like for them to sit over there and do their thing, let compound interest do its magic, and that's that. So that's pretty much how I started to build my investment portfolio. And if you're really looking at the time span, it's over a long period of time. I want to say now it's 5 to 6 years now that I've been like making these investment decisions. Well, in the beginning, obviously it was Liberty making those decisions, but I at least took that first step. Yeah, and as I grow and learn and upskill myself, I make better decisions. So I think it's important, like I said in my previous video, if you've watched that, it's just to start today with what you already have. And there are so many ways now that you can invest without having a large chunk of money, right? That's the beautiful thing about things like unit trusts, or about things like easy equities or Robinhood, etc., is that you really just don't have to have a lot of money in order for you to start investing. But you know, getting into that mindset of actually building a portfolio is so paramount, because you know, then you start also changing your small little behaviors on, like, you know, your shopping addiction or your coffee addiction. You're like, do I really need to do that? Or could I buy, like, I could buy more into my ETFs. I could, you know, I think it's a really good habit to start incorporating into your life. And the earlier you start, the better. And then you can also have those sort of like habits go onto your children if you decide to have children. So my loves, that is how I built my investment portfolio. If you have any questions on my investment portfolio, please don't be shy. Ask below in the comment section below. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe, to share, to like, to do all of those amazing things. And don't forget to follow me on Save with K Finance. Until next time, my loves. Bye.